Ava stumbled through the barren landscape, her breath ragged, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of life or hope. The planet was a wasteland, a battlefield that had seen countless wars. Broken machines, remnants of long-forgotten battles, littered the ground. Towers of twisted metal and shattered glass reached towards a sky choked with dark clouds. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a constant reminder that this place had been abandoned by everything living, except her. The moment she had been left behind replayed in her mind over and over, a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. One minute she was with the crew, exploring a derelict ship on a reconnaissance mission, and the next, she was alone, watching their ship disappear into the sky, leaving her stranded. Fear had been her first reaction, paralyzing, suffocating fear. But as the hours turned into days, that fear began to transform into something else. Anger, yes, but also a fierce determination. She wasn't going to die here. Not without a fight. Ava's father had been a mechanic, one of the best, and from a young age she had been by his side, learning the intricacies of machines. Engines, circuits, hydraulics, they all made sense to her in a way that nothing else did. That knowledge was her lifeline now. She knew that if she was going to survive on this planet, it would be because of what she could build, what she could create from the scraps around her. Her first days alone were a blur of exhaustion and desperation. She found a small cave to shelter in, just barely large enough to keep her hidden from the predators that roamed the planet at night. Food was scarce, and what little she could find was barely enough to sustain her. She scavenged whatever she could, edible plants, remnants of alien rations from the wreckage around her. Water was even harder to come by, but she managed to collect enough from the occasional rain that fell, pooling in the deep crevices of the landscape. But the real danger wasn't starvation. It was the creatures that hunted the planet. They were unlike anything Ava had ever seen, large, vicious, and seemingly impervious to pain. She had seen them tear apart what remained of other scavengers, both mechanical and organic. She knew it was only a matter of time before they found her, and when they did, she would need more than her small knife and quick reflexes to survive. It was on the 5th day that she came across it. She had ventured further from her shelter than she had before, driven by a desperation that bordered on madness. Her supplies were running low, and she knew she couldn't continue as she had been. She needed something more, something that would give her a fighting chance. The wreckage was enormous, half buried in the scorched earth. At first, it looked like just another pile of twisted metal, but as she approached, she realized it was something different. This was no ordinary machine. It was a war machine, ancient and powerful, or at least it had been in its prime. Now, it was just a hollow shell, its weapons silent, its armor cracked and broken. But even in its ruined state, Ava could see the potential. She ran her hands over the cold metal, her mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't just a piece of scrap, this was something she could use. Something she could rebuild. The idea struck her with a force that almost knocked her off her feet. She could build a tank. A war tank, something that could protect her, something that could give her a chance at survival. The realization brought with it a surge of hope, the first she had felt since she had been left on this god-forsaken planet. She could do this. She had to do this. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about taking control, about not letting this planet destroy her. If she could build the tank, if she could make it work, she might even have a way to fight back against the creatures that hunted her. For the first time since her abandonment, Ava felt a spark of something that wasn't fear or anger. It was purpose. She set to work immediately, scavenging parts from the wreckage, sorting through what was usable and what was beyond repair. The tank was in worse shape than she had first thought, but she wasn't deterred. She had always been good at fixing things, and this was just another challenge, albeit the biggest one she had ever faced. Days turned into nights, and nights into days as she worked tirelessly, driven by the need to finish before the creatures found her. She barely slept, surviving on the adrenaline that coursed through her veins. Slowly, the tank began to take shape. It was still far from complete, but every piece she added brought her closer to her goal. As she worked, she realized that the tank wasn't just a machine. It was becoming an extension of herself. Every part she added, every wire she connected, felt like she was putting herself into the machine. It was more than just a way to survive. It was her way of fighting back, of refusing to be beaten by this planet. And she knew deep down that once the tank was finished, she wouldn't just survive. She would find a way off this planet. She would find a way home. The war tank would be her salvation, her path to freedom. And nothing, not the creatures, not the planet, and certainly not the people who had abandoned her, would stop her. Ava sat cross-legged in the dirt, surrounded by the scattered pieces of metal and machinery she had salvaged. The tank, or what would become the tank, was still little more than a framework, an empty shell of potential. She stared at the alien technology spread out before her, feeling both excitement and trepidation. This was far beyond anything she had ever worked with. The parts were strange, their functions not immediately obvious, and their integration with the more familiar human components was going to be a challenge. But she didn't have a choice. This was her only shot at survival. She began by examining the core systems of the tank, trying to piece together how they were supposed to work. The control interface was completely foreign to her, filled with symbols she couldn't read and mechanisms she couldn't immediately understand. But she had always been good at figuring things out, and slowly, through a process of elimination and a lot of trial and error, she began to make progress. Her first attempts were clumsy, with wires sparking and components short-circuiting as she tried to connect them. The power source was particularly frustrating. The tank's original energy core was dead, and she had no idea how to revive it. She tried using smaller, makeshift batteries she'd cobbled together, but they were far too weak to power the massive machine. Every failure chipped away at her resolve, but she refused to give up. She was tired, hungry, and scared, but she kept working, driven by the knowledge that her life depended on this machine. As days passed, her frustration mounted. The parts were not designed to fit together easily, and every time she thought she had made progress, another problem would arise. The alien metal was resistant to her tools, and she had to come up with creative ways to manipulate it. The wiring didn't match up with anything she had seen before, forcing her to experiment with different configurations until something worked. More than once, she considered abandoning the project altogether, but each time, the thought of facing the planet's dangers unarmed pushed her to continue. Then, one evening, after what felt like an eternity of setbacks, she made her first real breakthrough. She had been working on the propulsion system, trying to find a way to activate the tank's treads. After countless failed attempts, she finally managed to get the system to respond. The treads whirred to life, jerking the tank forward slightly. It wasn't much, just a few inches of movement, but to Ava, it felt like victory. She let out a whoop of triumph, her heart pounding with exhilaration. For the first time, she felt like she was winning. With renewed energy, she focused on bringing the rest of the tank to life. The controls were still a challenge, but now that she had figured out the basic propulsion, she felt more confident in her ability to tackle the other systems. Slowly but surely, she connected the various components, rerouting power and making adjustments where necessary. The weapons systems were next. Though the tank's original arsenal was long gone, she managed to rig together a makeshift cannon using parts from other wrecked machines. It was crude, but it would do. Her first test run was nerve-wracking. She climbed into the tank, the interior cramped and cold. Her hands shook as she activated the systems, waiting to see if all her hard work would pay off. The tank roared to life, the engine humming with power. Ava felt a surge of pride as she took hold of the controls, maneuvering the tank forward. It wasn't smooth, there were still a lot of kinks to work out, but it moved. And that was enough. As she rolled the tank out into the open, she decided to test its capabilities against a nearby boulder. With a deep breath, she aimed the cannon and fired. The impact wasn't as powerful as she had hoped, but the boulder cracked and splintered, proving that the tank had some fight in it. Ava smiled to herself, a sense of satisfaction washing over her. She had done it. She had built a war machine out of nothing, using nothing but her wits and the scraps she had found. Over the following days, the tank became more than just a vehicle or a weapon. It became a part of her. She began to personalize it, etching symbols onto the metal, markings that reminded her of home and gave her strength. She added small touches, pieces of her clothing, items she had scavenged, making the tank feel less like a machine and more like a companion. Every time she climbed inside, she felt a connection, as if the tank understood her, shared her will to survive. But as much as she had accomplished, Ava knew the tank was still far from perfect. It was functional, but just barely. The power source was unreliable, the controls were still finicky, and the armor, though tough, had weak spots that could be easily exploited. She needed to make more upgrades if she was going to stand a chance against the greater dangers this planet had in store for her. The tank was a start, but it wasn't enough, not yet. And so, with a grim determination, Ava prepared herself for the next stage, ready to push herself and her creation to the limits. Ava had barely begun to feel a sense of accomplishment when the ground beneath her tank began to tremble. The low rumble, at first subtle, quickly grew into a violent shaking that sent a shiver down her spine. She tightened her grip on the controls, her eyes scanning the horizon. The landscape, once still, now seemed alive with movement. Then she saw it, a hulking mass of muscle and scales, a creature so enormous that it made her tank feel insignificant. The beast was charging straight toward her, its eyes locked on the war machine she had painstakingly built. Her heart raced as she swung the tank's cannon around, aiming for the creature. The tank jolted as she fired, the cannon blast striking the beast in its chest. But instead of falling, the creature roared, a deep, guttural sound that echoed across the wasteland. The shot had barely scratched its thick hide. Panic surged through Ava as she fired again and again, with the same futile results. The tank's weaponry, cobbled together from scraps, wasn't enough. The creature was too strong, too fast. The tank shuddered as the beast slammed into it, the force nearly knocking Ava from her seat. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, systems struggling to keep up with the damage. She tried to maneuver away, but the tank's movements were sluggish, the makeshift propulsion system groaning under the strain. Every second felt like an eternity as the creature continued its relentless assault, each blow pushing the tank closer to its breaking point. Desperation clawed at Ava as she scrambled to think of a solution. The tank wasn't built for this kind of battle. It was barely holding together. She fired one last shot, a direct hit to the creature's eye, which bought her a few precious seconds as the beast recoiled in pain. It wasn't enough to kill it, but it was enough to give her an opening. She slammed the controls forward, forcing the tank into motion, speeding away from the enraged predator. The tank limped across the terrain, Ava pushing it as hard as it would go. The creature, momentarily stunned, didn't pursue. But she knew it was only a matter of time before something else found her. The encounter had revealed just how vulnerable she still was, despite her progress. The tank had been her hope, her shield, but it was painfully clear that it wasn't enough. If she was going to survive on this planet, the tank needed to be more, much more. Shaken but determined, Ava pressed on, driving the tank further into the unknown. The landscape became more treacherous, with steep cliffs and jagged rocks, but the tank, though battered, continued to move forward. As she explored deeper, the planet began to reveal its secrets. She found the remains of an ancient civilization, their structures long crumbled to ruins. Strange symbols marked the walls, and as she moved through the area, the tank's sensors picked up unusual energy readings, faint but persistent. The air was thick with an unspoken history, the remnants of battles long past scattered everywhere. It was clear that this planet had seen its share of conflict, and whatever had happened here had left scars that ran deep into the earth itself. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the planet was aware of her presence in a way she couldn't quite understand. The tank's systems seemed to react on their own at times, responding to the environment in ways that defied logic. The longer she stayed, the more she realized that this planet was different, that it held secrets she was only beginning to uncover. Then, in the shadow of a massive cliff, she found it, a hidden cache of alien technology, untouched by time. The discovery sent a thrill through her. These weren't just parts, they were advanced, far beyond anything she had seen before. It was as if the planet itself had been waiting for her to find them. She quickly set to work, salvaging what she could and integrating the new components into her tank. The process was challenging, the alien tech complex and unfamiliar, but Ava's instincts guided her. Piece by piece, the tank transformed, shedding its makeshift origins and becoming something more formidable. The upgrades were substantial. The propulsion system was replaced with something far more efficient, giving the tank greater speed and agility. The armor was reinforced with a material that seemed to absorb energy, making it nearly impervious to the planet's dangers. She even managed to integrate a new weapon system, one that harnessed the strange energy readings she had detected, turning the tank into a force of destruction unlike anything she had imagined. As she finished the last of the upgrades, Ava sat back, exhaustion mingling with a deep sense of satisfaction. The tank was no longer a crude assembly of scrap metal and hope. It was a true war machine, powerful and resilient, capable of facing whatever this planet could throw at her. She ran her hands over the controls, feeling the hum of the new systems beneath her fingers. This was no longer just a tool, it was an extension of her will, a manifestation of her determination to survive. With the tank fully upgraded, Ava felt a renewed sense of confidence. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. The planet, once a source of constant fear, now seemed almost manageable. The dangers were still there, but now she had the means to confront them head-on. And as she looked out over the landscape, she knew that she wasn't just a girl abandoned on a hostile planet. She was a warrior, and this tank was her weapon. The planet might be full of secrets, but she was ready to uncover them all, one battle at a time. Ava's journey into the planet's depths began with a sense of curiosity, but it quickly turned into something far more profound. The tank, now a formidable machine, moved steadily through the narrow passages she had discovered, its sensors picking up faint energy signals that guided her deeper underground. The walls around her began to change, shifting from rough, natural rock to something more structured, almost organic. The further she went, the more the space around her seemed to pulse with life, as if the planet itself was breathing. It wasn't long before she came upon the entrance to a massive underground chamber. The sight that greeted her was unlike anything she had ever seen. The cavern was vast, filled with intricate machinery and structures that seemed to merge seamlessly with the living rock. At the center, a colossal, glowing core throbbed with energy, sending out rhythmic pulses that resonated through the tank's systems. It was as if the planet was speaking to her, its ancient voice reverberating through the metal and into her very bones. Ava stared in awe, her mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. The tank's systems, the ones she had so carefully upgraded, began to react on their own, integrating with the energy around them. She could feel the power coursing through the machine, a raw, untapped force that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The realization hit her with a jolt. This planet wasn't just a battlefield. It was a living organism, and the tank was now a part of its biomechanical defense system. The implications were staggering. Every upgrade she had made, every piece of alien technology she had integrated, had been part of an ancient design. The planet had been using her, guiding her to restore its defenses, to awaken a power that had lain dormant for centuries. But now that she understood, she was faced with a choice, one that weighed heavily on her. She could feel the tank systems urging her to tap into the planet's core, to harness its full power, and use it to defend herself against any threat. But as she looked around at the pulsating machinery, she couldn't shake the feeling that doing so would be wrong. The planet was alive, and if she used its power recklessly, she could destroy it, or worse, she could become a part of the very machinery that threatened to consume her. Before she could make her decision, the tank's sensors detected something above ground. A massive alien fleet, descending toward the planet. The readings were clear. They were heavily armed and likely coming to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Ava's heart raced. The fleet would be here soon, and she had to act quickly. The planet's power was the only thing that could stop them, but using it might come at a cost she wasn't willing to pay. She took a deep breath, her mind racing through the possibilities. If she used the tank's full capabilities, she could obliterate the fleet, but at the risk of damaging the planet beyond repair. But if she did nothing, the invaders would surely destroy her and the planet in their quest to reclaim it. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, a moral dilemma that left her torn between survival and responsibility. In that moment, Ava made a choice. She couldn't destroy the planet, it was too much a part of her now. Instead, she would try something different, something that had never been attempted before. She would communicate with the planet, try to reach its consciousness through the tank's biomechanical systems, and unite with it to defend against the invaders. She closed her eyes, placing her hands on the tank's controls, and focused all her energy on making a connection. The tank responded, its systems humming as they synced with the planet's core. She could feel the planet's pulse, its life force, and she reached out with her mind, trying to find a way in, to make herself understood. The effort was exhausting, every ounce of her concentration directed at forming a bond with the planet. Images flashed through her mind, memories, emotions, fragments of thoughts that weren't her own. The planet was ancient, its consciousness vast and unfathomable, but she could sense a glimmer of understanding, a faint recognition of her presence. She pushed harder, her willpower the only thing keeping the connection from slipping away. She poured her thoughts into the link, trying to convey her intentions, her desire to protect the planet without destroying it. The response was slow, but it came, a surge of warmth, a flood of energy that enveloped her and the tank. The planet was listening. With the connection established, Ava directed the tank's systems to synchronize with the planet's defenses. She could feel the power building, not just in the tank, but all around her, as the planet responded to her plea. The alien fleet was closing in, but now she was ready. She wasn't alone anymore, she had the planet on her side. As the fleet descended, the ground beneath them began to shake, and massive structures rose from the earth, glowing with the same energy that pulsed through the tank. Ava didn't fire a single shot. Instead, she guided the planet's defenses, channeling its power to create a shield, a barrier that pushed back against the invaders. The fleet's weapons were useless against the combined might of Ava and the planet, their ships crumbling under the pressure. In the end, the invaders had no choice but to retreat, their forces shattered. Ava watched as they fled, her heart pounding with the realization of what she had just accomplished. She had done it, not by destroying, but by uniting. The planet's power had been awakened, but not in the way the invaders had intended. It was a victory, not just for her, but for the planet itself. As the last of the ships disappeared from sight, Ava collapsed back into her seat, drained but triumphant. The planet's pulse was still there, a steady rhythm that echoed through her. She had made her choice, and she knew now that she had found something far more valuable than just a way home. She had found a new purpose, a bond with this living world that would last far beyond this moment. The sky above Ava darkened as the alien fleet descended, their ships blotting out the dim light that filtered through the planet's thick atmosphere. She sat in the tank, her fingers gripping the controls, heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. The connection with the planet was still strong, its pulse synchronized with her own. She could feel its anticipation, the ancient being stirring, ready to fight back against those who sought to claim it. The first wave of attacks came swiftly, energy blasts raining down from the sky, aimed directly at the planet's surface. But Ava was ready. She guided the tank forward, feeling the immense power coursing through its systems, a power that was now fully awakened and ready to be unleashed. With a thought, she directed the planet's defenses, channeling energy from its core through the tank, which acted as a conduit for the planet's might. Massive tendrils of energy shot up from the ground, intercepting the fleet's attacks, dissipating the destructive force before it could reach the surface. The alien ships shuddered as the planet's defenses struck back, ripping through their hulls, tearing them apart in a display of raw power. Ava maneuvered the tank with precision, each movement calculated, every strike deliberate. She was no longer just a girl fighting for survival, she was a warrior, a protector of this living world. The battle raged on, the sky lit up with flashes of energy and fire as the fleet desperately tried to break through. But Ava and the planet were in perfect harmony, their combined strength overwhelming the invaders. The tank, now more than just a machine, responded to her every command with a fluidity that felt almost organic. She could sense the planet's consciousness intertwined with hers, guiding her, supporting her, amplifying her efforts. As the battle reached its peak, Ava felt a shift within the planet, a surge of power unlike anything she had experienced before. The core, deep within the planet, was fully awakened, its energy spilling out into the environment. The ground trembled as ancient structures, long buried and forgotten, rose to the surface, adding their strength to the fight. The planet was not just defending itself, it was retaliating, pushing back with a force that left the invaders reeling. But amidst the chaos, Ava sensed something else, a presence, deep within the planet, that had been dormant until now. It was ancient, powerful, and it was aware of her. As the battle raged on, she realized that this presence was the true heart of the planet, the source of its power, and it was reaching out to her, testing her resolve. Ava hesitated for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She could feel the planet's power growing, its defenses becoming more aggressive, more destructive. The invaders were being driven back, but at what cost? The planet was alive, and if she pushed it too far, she risked unleashing a force that could not be controlled. In that moment, she made a decision. She would not let the planet's power consume it, or herself. She focused her mind, reaching out to the presence within the planet, pleading with it to trust her, to allow her to guide its power, rather than let it run rampant. She wasn't here to destroy, she was here to protect, to preserve. The presence responded, not with words, but with a sensation of acceptance, of understanding. With renewed determination, Ava redirected the planet's energy, tempering its fury, channeling its power in a controlled way. The attacks became more precise, targeting the invaders with deadly accuracy, but sparing the planet from unnecessary destruction. The tide of battle turned swiftly in her favor, the alien fleet faltering under the onslaught. But as the last of the invaders fell, Ava sensed a final, desperate move from the fleet's command ship, a massive energy weapon charging up, its aim locked on the planet's core. If it fired, the planet would be destroyed, taking her and everything else with it. She had only seconds to act. Without hesitation, Ava pushed the tank to its limits, tapping into the planet's energy one last time. The tank surged forward, its systems glowing with power as it intercepted the weapon's charge. The impact was devastating, the energy coursing through the tank and into the planet. For a moment, everything went white, the world around her fading into a blinding light. When the light cleared, the fleet was gone, reduced to debris scattered across the sky. The weapon had been destroyed, and the planet was safe. But Ava felt a deep weariness settle over her, the strain of the battle and the connection with the planet taking its toll. The tank, her faithful companion, was still functional, but she knew it would need time to recover, just as she would. As she looked out over the quieted landscape, Ava reflected on everything that had happened. She had come to this planet as a scared, abandoned girl, but now she was something more. She had found a purpose, a bond with a living world that had become her new home. The invaders had been repelled, but the experience had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She had a choice to make now, whether to stay on this planet, to continue protecting it and learning from it, or to try and find her way back to the life she had once known. But as she sat in the tank, feeling the steady pulse of the planet beneath her, she knew that her journey was far from over. The planet had chosen her, just as she had chosen it. And together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, side by side.